Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the biggest building he had ever seen. The Galactic University of Kepler 442 stretched high into the purple sky like a mountain made of glass and metal. Two suns hung in the alien sky, casting strange shadows that moved in different directions. He was 22 years old and had never been away from Earth before. His brown hair was messy from the long space journey, and his backpack felt heavy on his shoulders. Jake was the first human ever to study at this university, and he could feel the weight of that responsibility. The university had 40,000 students from 127 different worlds. As Jake walked through the main entrance, he saw creatures he had only read about in books. Some looked like giant insects with too many eyes. Others had fur and walked on four legs like dogs, but they wore clothes and carried books. A few had wings that sparkled in the sunlight. Everyone stared at him as he passed. Jake was tall compared to most of the other students. At 6 feet, he looked like a giant next to the small rabbit-like creatures that hopped around with their books. Even the bear-like students seemed nervous when they saw him. A helpful robot showed Jake to his room in the student housing building. The room was too small for his human size, but he made it work. His roommate was a blue-skinned student named Crix, who had 3 eyes and spoke in a high voice. Crix seemed nice, but kept his distance from Jake. "Are you really from Earth?" Crix asked on the first night. His voice shook a little. "Yes," Jake said, sitting on his bed carefully so it would not break. "Why do you ask?" "Everyone knows about Earth," Crix said. "It is a death world." "How did you survive there?" Jake laughed. "It is not that bad. Sure, we have some dangerous animals and the weather can be rough, but humans are good at staying alive." Crix did not look convinced. He pulled his blanket up to his chin and turned away. The next morning, Jake went to his first class. Advanced Predator-Prey Dynamics was taught by Professor Veltar, who looked like a giant praying mantis but wore a lab coat and glasses. His 4 green eyes could move in different directions at the same time, which was very strange to watch. The classroom was shaped like a bowl with seats going down toward the center. Jake sat in the back row because he could see better from there, and it meant fewer students would stare at him. Most of the seats were filled with students who looked like prey animals from Earth. There were the rabbit-like Rillans, the big-eyed tree creatures called Mortaxi, and some that looked like deer but with purple fur. Professor Veltar clicked his mouthparts together when he talked. "Welcome to Advanced Predator-Prey Dynamics," he said. "In this class, you will learn how hunters and the hunted interact across the galaxy. This knowledge is important for understanding how life works on different worlds." Jake pulled out his notebook and started writing. He had always been interested in animal behavior. Growing up on his family's ranch in Montana, he had learned to watch how animals acted around each other. He could tell when a horse was scared or when a dog was getting ready to fight just by watching their body language. "The relationship between predator and prey drives evolution," Professor Veltar continued. "Predators become better at hunting. Prey becomes better at escaping. This creates a cycle that never ends." A Rillan student raised her small hand. "Professor, what about humans?" "They are from a death world, but they do not look like predators." All eyes turned to Jake. He felt his face get hot as everyone stared at him. Professor Veltar's 4 eyes also focused on him. "An excellent question, Zara," the professor said. "Humans are indeed from what we call a death world, but their evolution took an unusual path. They developed intelligence and tool use instead of claws and fangs. This made them very successful, but they are not traditional predators." Jake wanted to say something, but he kept quiet. He had learned that it was better to listen first and speak later. "For your final project this semester," Professor Veltar announced, "you will observe a real predator in action. We will bring a live specimen to class so you can see predator behavior up close." The class erupted in worried sounds. The Rillan students made high-pitched, squeaking noises. The Mortaxi students' big eyes got even bigger. Even the bear-like Corvin students looked uncomfortable. "Do not worry," Professor Veltar said, raising his long arms for quiet. "The predator will be contained in an energy field. You will be completely safe while you observe and take notes." A Mortaxi student with golden fur raised her hand. What kind of predator will it be? That is a surprise, Professor Veltar said, with what might have been a smile. It was hard to tell with his insect face, but I can promise it will be one of the most dangerous creatures we have access to. After class, Jake walked across the campus to get lunch. The food court had meals from dozens of different worlds. He got something that looked like a sandwich, but tasted like chicken. As he ate, he noticed how other students acted around him. They gave him plenty of space. When he walked by, conversations stopped. Some students would watch him eat, as if they expected him to do something strange. Few brave students came up to ask questions about Earth, but most kept their distance. Jake finished his meal and headed to his next class. On the way, he passed a group of Rillan students who were talking in their high voices. I heard that humans eat meat every day, one of them said. My professor said their planet has creatures that can kill you just by touching you, another added. And the weather on Earth can freeze you solid or burn you alive, a third one whispered. Jake stopped walking. He turned to face the group of students, who immediately went quiet and looked scared. Earth is not that bad, he said in a friendly voice. Yes, we have some dangerous animals and extreme weather, but humans are good at adapting. We learned to work together and use tools to survive. The Rillan students nodded quickly and hopped away as fast as they could. Jake sighed and continued walking. Over the next few days, Jake settled into university life. His classes were interesting, and he was learning a lot about alien biology and behavior. But he could not shake the feeling that everyone was afraid of him for the wrong reasons. They thought he was dangerous because he came from a death world. They imagined Earth as a place full of monsters and disasters. But Jake knew the truth was different. Humans were not dangerous because of where they came from. They were dangerous because of what they had become. On Earth, humans had learned to survive by being smarter than everything else. They did not have the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws, but they could think ahead and plan. They could work together in ways that other animals could not. They could make tools and weapons that made them more deadly than any natural predator. But Jake did not think his fellow students were ready to hear that truth. Not yet. As he sat in his small room that night, looking out at the alien stars, Jake wondered what would happen when Professor Veltar brought that predator to class. He had a feeling that the demonstration would not go the way anyone expected. Jake had grown up around dangerous animals. He knew how predators thought and acted. He also knew something that his classmates and professors did not understand yet. Humans might look peaceful and friendly, but they were predators too. They were just a different kind of predator than anything the galaxy had ever seen before. 3 days later, Jake walked into Professor Veltar's classroom and stopped. Everything had changed. The normal desks were gone, replaced by rows of seats that faced a large clear box in the center of the room. The box was made of some kind of see-through metal that sparkled with energy. Thick cables ran from the box to machines that hummed quietly in the corners. Jake took his usual seat in the back row. Around him, his classmates whispered nervously to each other. Many seats were empty. Some students had asked to watch the class from their rooms using video feeds instead of coming in person. Zara, the small Rillan student who had asked about humans before, sat 2 rows ahead of Jake. Her long ears twitched back and forth as she looked around the room. Next to her sat Kef, a Mortaxi with bright yellow eyes that were even bigger than usual today. I heard the creature they are bringing can jump 20 feet, Zara whispered to Kef. My cousin told me it has poisonous claws, Kef whispered back. His voice shaking. Professor Veltar entered the classroom, wearing a thick protective suit instead of his normal lab coat. Behind him came 6 security guards, all from different warrior species that Jake recognized from his xenobiology books. The guards wore heavy armor and carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. Students, Professor Veltar announced, his voice coming through speakers in his helmet. Today you will witness something truly special. The creature we have brought is one of the most perfect predators known to science. The guards wheeled in a large metal container that looked like a bank vault. Warning symbols covered every surface in dozens of different alien languages. Jake could read a few of them. They all said the same thing: extreme danger. Before we begin, Professor Veltar continued, I want to remind everyone to stay in your seats no matter what happens. The containment field is strong enough to hold our specimen, but sudden movements or loud noises might disturb it. One of the guards, a tall creature with rock-like skin, stepped forward. The specimen is awake and active, he reported. Oh. Safety systems are working normally. Professor Veltar nodded his insect head. Excellent. Students, I present to you a Nexus Stalker from the Veil Nebula system. The metal container opened with a loud hiss. A platform rose from inside, carrying something that made the entire class gasp. Even Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The creature was about the size of a large dog, but that was where any similarity to Earth animals ended. Its body was covered in black fur that seemed to eat light, making it hard to see clearly even in the bright classroom. It had 6 legs, each ending in paws with claws that looked like curved knives. But the most unsettling thing was its eyes. The Nexus Stalker had pure white eyes with no pupils that Jake could see. They seemed to glow with their own light as they looked around the room. The creature's head moved in sharp, quick motions as it studied its surroundings. The Nexus Stalker is the apex predator of its homeworld, Professor Veltar explained. It can leap 50 feet in a single bound. Its claws can cut through most metals. But most impressive is its reaction time of 0.03 seconds. The creature was placed inside the energy containment field. As soon as the field activated, the Nexus Stalker began to move. It walked around the edge of its prison, testing the invisible walls with its paws. When it touched the energy barrier, small sparks of light appeared, but the creature did not seem bothered by them. Jake leaned forward in his seat. He had seen predators before, but nothing like this. The way the Nexus Stalker moved was perfectly smooth, like water flowing over rocks. Every step was placed exactly where it needed to be. Its head never stopped moving as it watched everything around it. Notice how the specimen maps its environment, Professor Veltar said. It is learning the size and shape of its containment area. This behavior shows high intelligence combined with hunting instincts. The Nexus Stalker suddenly froze in place. For a moment, it became almost invisible as its black fur blended with the shadows. Then it exploded into motion, jumping from one side of the containment field to the other in the blink of an eye. Several students screamed. Fascinating, Professor Veltar said, making notes on his tablet. The specimen is demonstrating its ambush tactics. In the wild, it would wait motionless for hours before striking its prey. Zara raised a shaking hand. Professor, how do creatures on its world survive against something like that? They do not, Professor Veltar replied. The Nexus Stalker has no natural enemies on its homeworld. It is what we call an apex predator. Nothing hunts it. The creature continued to pace around its containment area. Its white eyes swept across the classroom, looking at each student in turn. When those eyes focused on someone, that student would shrink back in their seat. The Nexus Stalker seemed to be deciding which of them would make the best meal. Jake watched the creature's behavior carefully. Growing up on a ranch, he had learned to read animal body language. This predator was not just testing its cage for weak spots. It was studying everyone in the room, learning about them. The Nexus Stalker hunts prey up to 3 times its own size, Professor Veltar continued. It uses intelligence and speed rather than brute strength. This makes it incredibly dangerous to most species. The creature suddenly stopped moving again. This time, instead of freezing like before, it sat down on its haunches like a cat. But its white eyes never stopped moving, never stopped watching. Interesting, Professor Veltar muttered. The specimen appears to be relaxing. This suggests it does not perceive any threats in its current environment. Jake disagreed. The Nexus Stalker was not relaxing. It was calculating. He had seen barn cats do the same thing when they spotted mice. They would sit perfectly still while they figured out the best way to catch their prey. A Corven student named Boren raised his large paw. Professor, why does it keep looking at us? Can it see through the containment field? The field is one-way transparent, Professor Valtar explained. The specimen can see out, but we appear slightly blurred to it. However, it can still detect movement and heat signatures. As if to prove the professor's point, the Nexus stalker's head turned to follow a student who was quietly reaching for his water bottle. The creature's white eyes tracked the movement perfectly. Now watch this, Professor Valtar said. He pressed a button on his control tablet. A small piece of synthetic meat appeared inside the containment field. The change in the Nexus stalker was immediate. Its relaxed posture vanished, replaced by pure predatory focus. It dropped low to the ground and began moving toward the meat with deadly purpose. Every muscle in its body was ready to spring into action, but then something strange happened. The creature stopped halfway to the meat and lifted its head, sniffing the air. Its white eyes began scanning the classroom again, but this time they moved differently. Before, it had been looking at the students like they were potential prey. Now it was looking for something else, curious, Professor Valtar said. The specimen is displaying unusual caution. Nexus stalkers are normally fearless when feeding. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The creature was not being cautious about the food. It was being cautious about something in the room. Something it sensed but could not identify, the Nexus. Stalker abandoned the meat entirely and resumed pacing around its containment field, but now its movements were different. Before, it had moved like a confident predator exploring new territory. Now it moved like something that knew it was being watched by an enemy. Jake glanced around at his classmates. They were all focused on the creature, fascinated and terrified by its deadly beauty. None of them noticed what Jake was beginning to understand. The Nexus stalker was no longer acting like the apex predator of its world. It was acting like prey. The Nexus stalker had been pacing for 10 minutes when something changed. The creature stopped moving and turned its head toward the back of the classroom. Its pure white eyes locked onto Jake Morrison. Jake felt the weight of that stare immediately. He had experienced something similar before when facing down an angry bull on his family's ranch, but this was different. The Nexus stalker was not looking at him with anger or hunger. It was looking at him with something Jake had never expected. To see from an apex predator. Fear. The classroom fell silent as everyone noticed the change. The Nexus stalker stood perfectly still, its 6 legs planted firmly on the floor of its containment field. Its white eyes never moved away from Jake's face. Remarkable, Professor Valtar whispered, his 4 eyes focusing on the creature. The specimen has identified something of interest, but Jake could see what the professor could not. The Nexus stalker had not just noticed him, it had recognized him as a threat. The creature's body language was completely different now. Its ears had flattened against its head. Its powerful muscles were tense, ready to run rather than attack. Professor, Jake said quietly, raising his hand, I think you should check the containment field. The field is operating perfectly, Mr. Morrison. Professor Valtar replied without looking away from his instruments. The specimen is simply displaying natural curiosity toward an unfamiliar species. Jake knew the professor was wrong, but he did not want to argue in front of the whole class. Instead, he decided to test his theory. Moving very slowly, he stood up from his seat. The reaction was immediate. The Nexus stalker took 3 quick steps backward, moving away from Jake's side of the containment field. Its claws extended fully, but not in an attack position. They were extended for defense, ready to fight for its life if necessary. The entire class gasped. Even the security guards looked confused. One of them, a reptile-like warrior with scales, spoke into his radio. Control. The specimen is showing unusual behavior. It appears to be retreating from something. Zara turned around in her seat to stare at Jake. Her small rabbit face was full of confusion. What is happening? Why is it moving away from you? I am not sure, Jake lied. He knew exactly what was happening, but he was not ready to explain. Professor Valtar finally looked up from his instruments. All 4 of his eyes focused on Jake, then moved to the Nexus stalker, then back to Jake again. This is unprecedented, the professor muttered. Nexus stalkers do not retreat from anything. They are the ultimate predators of their ecosystem. Jake took another step closer to the containment field. The Nexus stalker immediately moved to the far corner of its prison, as far away from Jake as possible. The creature was making soft sounds now, low whines that sounded almost like a frightened dog. Dr. Lisa Carter, a visiting professor from the Centauri system, stood up from her seat in the front row. She was human like Jake, but older and smaller. The Nexus stalker barely glanced at her. "This is impossible," Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with scientific excitement. "I have studied Nexus stalkers for 15 years. They have never shown fear of any species, including other apex predators." Jake moved closer to the containment field again. With each step he took, the Nexus stalker pressed itself further against the back wall. The creature's breathing had become fast and shallow. Its white eyes were wide with panic. "Stop," Professor Veltar commanded. "Mr. Morrison, please return to your seat. You are causing distress to the specimen." "I am not doing anything," Jake said, but he stopped moving. "I am just standing here." That was true. Jake was not making any threatening gestures or loud noises. He was simply existing in the same space as the predator. But somehow that was enough to terrify a creature that had never known fear. Kef, the yellow-eyed Mortaxi student, raised his hand with a shaking arm. "Professor, is the human dangerous? Should we evacuate the classroom?" "Humans are classified as a peaceful species," Professor Veltar replied, but his voice carried uncertainty. "Mr. Morrison poses no threat to anyone in this room." Jake almost laughed at that. The professor was right that Jake would never hurt his classmates. But the idea that humans were not dangerous was so wrong that it was almost funny. "Professor," Jake said carefully, "I think there is something you need to understand about humans." "What do you mean?" Jake looked around the classroom at all the frightened faces staring at him. "These students came from worlds where the most dangerous creatures were plant-eaters with sharp horns or flying animals with stingers. They had no idea what real predators looked like." "Earth is not just a death world because of the environment," Jake began. "It is a death world because of the life forms that evolved there. Everything on my planet is designed to kill everything else." The Nexus stalker made another whining sound as if it understood what Jake was saying. "The gravity on Earth is so strong that it would crush most of the species in this room," Jake continued. "The atmosphere contains oxygen at levels that would poison many aliens. The weather can create storms that destroy entire cities." Jake paused and looked directly at the contained predator, which was now pressed so tightly against the far wall that it seemed to be trying to merge with the barrier. "But the worst thing about Earth is not the planet itself. It is what lives there. We have creatures that can kill you with a single bite. Animals that hunt in groups and can run for hours without getting tired. Predators that are so perfectly adapted to killing that they have remained unchanged for millions of years." Borin, the large Corvin student, shifted nervously in his seat. "But humans are not like those creatures. You do not have claws or fangs." Jake smiled, and for the first time since entering the classroom, he let a little bit of his true nature show through. It was not a mean smile or a cruel smile. It was the smile of a creature that knew it was the most dangerous thing in the room. "That is what makes humans truly terrifying," Jake said softly. "We do not need claws or fangs. We do not need venom or armor. We became the dominant species on Earth using nothing but our intelligence and our willingness to never give up." The Nexus stalker was now making continuous distress calls, a high-pitched keening sound that filled the classroom. It was clearly communicating that it wanted to be removed from the presence of the human immediately. "Humans are persistence hunters," Jake explained, his voice remaining calm and quiet. "We do not catch our prey by being faster or stronger. We catch it by following it until it collapses from exhaustion. We can run for hours, even days, without stopping." Dr. Carter was frantically taking notes on her tablet. "This is incredible. The specimen is displaying classic prey behavior in the presence of a super predator. We are also pack hunters," Jake continued. We can coordinate complex strategies with dozens of other humans. We can communicate over long distances and plan attacks that take place over weeks or months. The security guards were looking at each other nervously. One of them, a creature with 4 arms and blue skin, moved his hand closer to his weapon. Most importantly, Jake said, we are tool users. We can kill from distances that most predators cannot even see. We can set traps that work even when we are not there. We can create weapons that make us more deadly than any natural predator. The Nexus Stalker suddenly threw itself against the containment field, trying desperately to escape. The energy barrier held, but the creature did not stop trying. It clawed at the invisible walls, leaving scratches of light in the air. Please, it seemed to be saying, please let me get away from this thing. Jake looked around the silent classroom one more time. Every face was staring at him with a mixture of fear and fascination. They were beginning to understand what he had tried to tell them. Humans were not just survivors of a death world. They were the reason it was called a death world in the first place. The Nexus Stalker was now throwing itself against the containment field with such force that the energy barrier flickered with each impact. The creature's desperate attempts to escape filled the room with crackling sounds and flashes of light. Its white eyes never left Jake's face, and the fear in them was clear to everyone in the classroom. Professor Veltar stepped back from his control panel, all 4 of his eyes wide with shock. In 30 years of studying predator behavior, I have never seen anything like this, he said. The specimen is showing textbook prey responses to a superior predator. Jake remained calm, but inside he felt sorry for the creature. The Nexus Stalker was not evil or cruel. It was just an animal following its instincts. And right now, every instinct it had was screaming at it to run from the human. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with scientific curiosity. You said that humans became dominant on Earth through intelligence and persistence. But you are not displaying any aggressive behavior. You're simply standing there, Jake nodded slowly. That is exactly the point, Dr. Carter. Humans do not need to show aggression to be dangerous. We do not need to roar or bare our teeth or make ourselves look bigger. We just exist. He gestured toward the panicking Nexus Stalker. This creature has never met a human before, but it knows what I am. Its instincts are millions of years old, and they are telling it that I am the most dangerous thing it has ever encountered. Zara raised her small hand, her voice barely above a whisper. But how can it know that? You look so normal. Jake considered how to explain something that even he did not fully understand. Predators recognize other predators even across species. It is something in the way we move, the way we breathe, the way we look at the world around us. He took a small step to the left. The Nexus Stalker immediately moved to keep the maximum distance between them, its claws scraping against the containment field. This creature evolved on a world where it was the ultimate hunter. Nothing on its planet could threaten it. But humans evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill everything else. We had to become better predators than creatures that were bigger, faster, and stronger than us. Professor Veltar was recording everything on his tablet, his mandibles clicking rapidly with excitement. Please continue, Mr. Morrison. This is revolutionary data. Jake looked around the classroom at his fellow students. They were all pressed back in their seats, unconsciously trying to put distance between themselves and him. He realized that they were having the same reaction as the Nexus Stalker, just not as strong. Humans are pursuit predators, Jake explained. We do not need to be the fastest or the strongest. We just need to be smarter and more determined than our prey. We can follow an animal for days, even weeks, until it is too tired to run anymore. Kef made a small squeaking sound. You mean humans would chase something until it died from exhaustion? If necessary, yes, Jake said simply. But that is not the scary part. The scary part is that we can think ahead. We can predict where our prey will go and set traps for it. We can work together with other humans to surround it. We can make tools that let us kill from far away. The Nexus Stalker had stopped throwing itself against the barriers and was now crouched in the corner, making continuous low whining sounds. It looked like it was trying to make itself as small as possible. But most terrifying of all, Jake continued, is that humans never give up. If we decide that something needs to die, we will keep trying until it happens. We might fail the first time, or the 10th time, or the 100th time. But we will keep learning from our mistakes and trying new approaches until we succeed. Boren, the Corvin student, was gripping his desk so hard that his claws were leaving marks in the metal. Are you saying that humans see other species as prey? Jake shook his head quickly. No, not at all. Modern humans have learned to control those instincts. We chose to become a peaceful species and join the galactic community. We can feel compassion and friendship for other beings. He paused and looked directly at the Nexus stalker, which flinched away from his gaze. But those old instincts are still there, buried deep inside us. We cannot turn them off completely, and predators like this one can sense them. Dr. Carter stood up and moved closer to the containment field, but not as close as Jake. The Nexus stalker watched her, but did not show the same level of fear it displayed toward Jake. Fascinating, she murmured. The specimen shows mild caution toward me, but nothing like its reaction to you. What is the difference? Jake thought about that. Dr. Carter was human too, but she had spent most of her life in laboratories and classrooms. She had probably never hunted anything or been in a real fight. I grew up on a cattle ranch in Montana, Jake explained. I learned to handle dangerous animals from the time I could walk. I have faced down angry bulls, chased off wolves, and dealt with predators that wanted to kill my family's livestock. The room fell silent except for the Nexus stalker's continued whimpering. I have had to make life-or-death decisions. I have had to be ready to kill something to protect what I cared about. Those experiences brought my predator instincts closer. To the surface, Professor Veltar looked up from his tablet. You are suggesting that some humans are more dangerous than others? All humans have the same basic potential, Jake said. But some of us have been in situations where we had to use those instincts. Soldiers, hunters, people who work with dangerous animals. We are all still peaceful and friendly, but that other part of us is more awake. A new voice spoke up from near the door. What about competitive athletes? Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Alex Chen, a human exchange student from the engineering department. He was shorter than Jake, but built like a runner, with muscles that showed he trained regularly. Alex walked into the classroom, and the Nexus stalker's reaction was immediate. The creature pressed itself even further into the corner and began making frantic chirping sounds. I am a marathon runner, Alex explained as he took a seat near the back. I train 6 hours a day. I have run races that lasted for 12 hours straight without stopping. The Nexus stalker was now making sounds that could only be described as screaming. It was no longer just afraid. It was terrified. You see, Jake said to the shocked classroom, Alex here represents something that every prey animal on Earth learned. To fear. He is a human who has trained his body to never stop running. To a creature like this Nexus stalker, Alex is the ultimate nightmare. A predator that will chase you forever and never get tired. Dr. Carter was writing notes so fast that her stylus was smoking. 2 humans in the same room, and the specimen is showing complete panic responses. This suggests that humans are not just apex predators, but super predators. Professor Veltar clicked his mandibles nervously. Mr. Morrison, Mr. Chun, I think? You should both leave the classroom. The specimen is in severe distress, but Jake was not finished. Professor, there is one more thing you need to understand. I am considered very normal by human standards. Alex is a good athlete, but not exceptional. If you really want to understand what humans are capable of, you should meet some of our Special Forces soldiers. The Nexus stalker made a sound like a scream and fainted. The entire classroom stared in shock at the unconscious predator. The most dangerous creature in the known galaxy had just passed out from fear of 2 college students. Or better yet, Jake added quietly, you should meet my grandmother. She raised 12 children on a farm during wartime. Now that is a truly scary human. In the silence that followed, everyone in the room began to understand a terrible truth. Humans had not joined the galactic community because they were weak and needed protection. They had joined because they were so dangerous that they needed to be watched. The unconscious Nexus stalker lay curled in the corner of its containment field like a frightened cat. The most feared predator in the galaxy had fainted at the sight of two human college students. The security guards quickly moved to remove the creature from the classroom, their faces showing confusion and concern. Professor Veltar watched his prize specimen being wheeled away, all four of his eyes blinking rapidly. His carefully planned demonstration had turned into something completely unexpected. Instead of showing his students how predators behaved, he had discovered something that would change everything scientists thought they knew about humans. Class? Dismissed, Professor Veltar announced, his voice shaking slightly. Please submit your observation reports by tomorrow morning. The students filed out of the classroom in unusual silence. Most of them kept glancing back at Jake and Alex with expressions of fear and amazement. Zara hurried past Jake without making eye contact, her long ears pressed flat against her head. Kef moved so quickly that he almost tripped over his own feet in his rush to get away. Only a few students remained behind. Dr. Carter was still taking notes, her stylus moving rapidly across her tablet. Professor Veltar stood motionless near, his control panel staring at the empty containment field. "Professor," Jake said gently, "are you all right?" Professor Veltar turned his insect head toward Jake, and for the first time, Jake could see fear in the alien's compound eyes. "Mr. Morrison, I have been teaching xenobiology for 30 years. I thought I understood predator behavior. But what happened here today? He trailed off, unable to finish his sentence. Dr. Carter looked up from her notes. "Professor Veltar, we need to contact the Galactic Council immediately. This discovery changes everything we know about human classification." "What do you mean?" Alex asked. He had remained quiet during most of the demonstration, but now he looked concerned. "The Galactic Council classified humans as a level 7 species," Dr. Carter explained. "That classification is based on technological advancement and peaceful behavior. But it does not account for biological factors." She gestured toward the empty containment field. "What we saw today proves that humans are not just technologically advanced. You are biological super-predators who chose to be peaceful." Jake sat down heavily in one of the classroom chairs. "Dr. Carter, we do not think of ourselves that way. Humans are just normal to us." "That is exactly the problem," Professor Veltar said, his voice gaining strength. "You do not realize how dangerous you are because everyone around you is equally dangerous. It is like a world full of lions trying to understand why sheep are afraid of them." Alex frowned. "But we are not violent. Humans have built a peaceful society. We have art and music and literature. We care about each other." "Which makes you even more terrifying," Dr. Carter said bluntly. "You have all the instincts and abilities of perfect predators, but you also have advanced intelligence and emotional control. You are predators who can choose when to hunt and when to show mercy." Jake thought about his life on Earth. His family raised cattle, but they also had pet dogs and cats that they loved. They could slaughter a cow for food in the morning, and then spend the evening playing with their children. To them, it was perfectly normal behavior, but to a species like the Rillans, who ate only plants and had never hurt another living thing, humans must seem like monsters wearing friendly masks. "Professor," Jake said slowly, "what happens now? Will the university ask us to leave?" Professor Veltar was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," he admitted. "This discovery will need to be reported to the highest levels of the galactic government. They will have to decide how to handle the fact that they have been treating apex predators as harmless herbivores." Over the next few days, word of the incident spread throughout the university like wildfire. Jake found that other students now gave him a much wider space when he walked across campus. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Some students would change direction to avoid walking near him, but not all the reactions were negative. Several professors from different departments contacted Jake, asking if he would participate in research studies. They wanted to understand more about human biology and psychology. Dr. Martinez from the psychology department was particularly interested. Mr. Morrison, she said during their first interview, can you tell me what it feels like to be human? Do you ever have urges to hunt or fight? Jake thought carefully before answering. I do not wake up thinking about hunting other people, he said. But sometimes, when I see someone being bullied or threatened, I feel something inside me that is very then intense, like I would do anything to protect them. And if someone threatened your family? Then I would stop them, Jake said simply, whatever it took. Dr. Martinez made notes on her tablet. That protective instinct is found in many species. But in humans, it seems to be combined with the intelligence and tools to make it incredibly effective. Meanwhile, Alex had his own interviews with the physical fitness researchers. They were amazed by human endurance capabilities. The fact that humans could run for hours without stopping was shocking to species that tired after a few minutes of activity. On my world, explained Dr. Korth, a bird-like researcher with colorful feathers, the fastest runners can maintain top speed for perhaps 30 seconds. You humans can run at a steady pace for hours. To us, that is like being chased by a slow but unstoppable machine. The interviews and tests continued for weeks. Jake learned things about humans that he had never considered before. Human eyesight was incredibly good at tracking movement. Human hearing could pick up sounds that indicated fear or distress from great distances. Human sense of smell, while not as good as some animals, was still better than most galactic species. But the most disturbing discovery was about human intelligence. When researchers tested Jake's ability to predict and plan, they found that he could think several steps ahead in complex scenarios. Combined with human persistence and tool use, this made humans incredibly effective at solving problems. It is like playing chess against someone who can see 20 moves ahead and never gets tired of playing. One researcher told his colleagues the final report took 3 months to complete. When it was finished, it was classified at the highest levels of galactic security. Jake was allowed to read a summary, but most of the details were kept secret. What he learned was sobering. The report concluded that humans were not just apex predators, but potentially the most dangerous species ever encountered by galactic civilization. The fact that humans had chosen to be peaceful was the only reason they had been allowed to join the galactic community. The human species represents a unique challenge, the summary stated. They possess all the characteristics of perfect predators. Combined with advanced technology and social organization, their peaceful behavior appears to be a conscious choice rather than a biological limitation. Jake finished reading and looked up at Professor Veltar, who had been given permission to share the summary with him. So what happens now? Jake asked. Now we learn to live with the knowledge that one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy has chosen to be our friends, Professor Veltar replied. And we hope that choice continues to be the right one for all of us. Jake returned to his classes, but everything was different now. His fellow students treated him with a mixture of respect and caution. Professors spoke to him more carefully. As if they were afraid of making him angry, the incident became known throughout the galaxy as the Predator Paradox. It sparked discussions and debates that would continue for years. Some species called for humans to be reclassified and monitored more closely. Others argued that humans had proven their peaceful intentions through centuries of cooperation, but Jake knew the truth was simpler than all the political debates. Humans were dangerous because they had evolved on a world that required them to be dangerous. But they were also capable of love, friendship, and mercy because those traits had also helped them survive. The galaxy would have to learn to live with both sides of human nature. And humans would have to learn to live with the knowledge that their neighbors would always be a little afraid of them. As Jake walked across campus one evening, watching the twin suns set over the alien landscape, he realized that maybe that was not such a bad thing. A little healthy fear might help keep the peace between species for a very long time.